for more than 6 decades. Paul Anka guarded some of Frank Sinatra's most closely guarded secrets, never once letting them slip into public view. But now, at the age of 84, he has finally decided to speak. Back in 1968, Sinatra looked him directly in the eye and told him something that completely altered the way Paul saw everything. It wasn't just about the famous song My Way. It was about ties to the mob, scandals that were deliberately buried, and the chilling disappearances of people who dared to cross the chairman of the board. Paul Anka witnessed it all firsthand. He kept his silence through threats, through attempts to bribe him, and through dangers that could have ended his career worse. Yet time has a way of loosening even the tightest lips, and now the stories he is beginning to share have the power to completely dismantle Sinatra's carefully built legacy. Paul Anka's story begins far from the glitz of Las Vegas, or the flashing lights of Hollywood. He was born on July 30th, 1941, at the Ottawa Civic Hospital in Canada. His parents were immigrants determined to build a better life. His father, Andrew Anka, had arrived from Damascus in 1924 with only $15 in his pocket and a single suitcase. In Ottawa, Andrew opened a modest restaurant called Locanda on Laurier Avenue West. The menu was simple spaghetti dishes sold for just 45 cents, but the food was so good that journalists from the Ottawa Citizen wrote about it. For young Paul, that restaurant became his entire world by the time he was 7 years old. Paul could name every federal cabinet minister in Canada. He learned these details from political conversations that unfolded regularly at table number 4 on Saturdays. He personally greeted more than 300 customers. He watched his father closely, studying how Andrew hustled, worked tirelessly, smiled warmly, and shook hands with every guest. Paul memorized each detail of his father's manner. The Anka family lived in a cramped 2-bedroom house on Clearview Avenue with 5 people packed under one roof. Winters there were brutal, dropping to negative 25 degrees Celsius. Paul would practice singing with mittens on, his breath fogging in the freezing air. Money was scarce, but 2 influences shaped him deeply: his father's relentless drive and his mother's soft Arabic lullabies. His mother, Camelia, was from Lebanon, and the melodies she sang to him stayed etched in his memory. In the fall of 1953, when Paul was only 12 years old, he walked into Fisher Park High School with a battered $14 guitar that someone had lent him. He announced to everyone that he had started a new band, which he called the Bobby Soxers. He recruited 2 of his classmates, Raymond Carrier and Gerald Blaise, and together they practiced endlessly in his basement, surrounded by crates of tomatoes from his father's restaurant. Sometimes rehearsals stretched past 2 in the morning. Paul also taught himself to play piano using a worn-out John Thompson instruction book. During math class, he secretly scribbled lyrics on his notebooks. By the time he was 13, he had already written 27 original songs. His music teacher, Frederick Karam, remembered his creativity vividly. One time, Paul desperately wanted to perform at the Fairmont Club in Quebec, but he was underage. So, in a bold move, he took his mother's Buick, even though he had no license, and drove across the river. He managed to convince the doorman to let him perform for free. That night, he sang I Confess, a song he had written himself. Not only did he win first prize $25 in cash, but he also earned a full week of bookings. The police gave him nothing more than a warning for driving without a license. But to everyone else, he was already a young man who refused to quit. Every Sunday, Paul sang at St. Elias Cathedral, where he absorbed ancient hymns written in unusual time signatures, such as 7/8. Late at night, he also tuned into CKUA radio, listening to the latest boogie-woogie tunes. Slowly, he began blending those church hymns with the upbeat rhythms he heard on the radio. The result was a unique sound that one judge at a YMCA contest later described as weirdly hypnotic. By 1955, Paul was the star attraction at nearly every local talent show. In just half a year, he performed an astonishing 42 times. One of those performances took place during halftime at a Rough Riders football game, where 19,000 people clapped along to one of his original songs. The tune had an unusual name, Wild Deva's Tans, Fontaine, taken from a book he had been reading for English class. The Ottawa Journal quickly labeled him the pint-sized Sinatra. At just 14 years old, Paul was earning more than 60 Canadian dollars. A week triple what most kids his age received in allowance. Then came the soup can contest that changed everything. In early 1955, Campbell's announced that anyone who sent in 1,500 labels would win $100 and a free plane ticket anywhere in North America. For 3 months, Paul dug through IGA dumpsters collecting soup can labels. With the help of his sister Miriam, who glued the labels onto entry forms, Paul eventually filled 12 full sacks. On May 5, 1955, he was declared the winner. Chose Los Angeles as his destination. With just $200 in his pocket, he stayed with his Uncle Morris in Hawthorne and hitchhiked 18 kilometers to Modern Records to try his luck. Though they refused him an official audition, he still managed to leave behind a demo tape. That day, he also laid eyes on the Capitol Records Tower for the very first time and silently promised himself that one day you'd be inside it. That Christmas, Paul shocked his parents with his decision he didn't want to return to school. Instead, he wanted to go to New York to chase music. His father, Andy, agreed, but with one strict condition. Paul had 6 months to secure a record deal. If he failed, he would have to come home and work full-time at the restaurant. Known January 1, 1956, Paul boarded a CPR train with $500 and 2 suitcases. 16 hours later, he stepped off at Grand Central Station. Exactly 53 days into his 6-month deadline, he auditioned for Don Costa at a BC Paramount. He sang Diana, and Costa immediately called Andy back in Ottawa. "Your boy just wrote a million seller," Costa told him. Paul would never have to work in the restaurant again by 1957. Paul's entire future rested on a single song and a 5-minute audition. With just a demo recording of Diana, he sang for Costa, who stopped him halfway through the first verse and called in everyone in the building to listen. Within the hour, Paul had a record contract in hand. The label offered him 2 cents per record sold, double the usual rate for new singers. The story of his lightning-fast auditions spread across the industry. And from then on, any unexpected breakout hit was nicknamed a 5-minute miracle. Diana was officially recorded on May 19, 1957, at RCA's Studio B and released that July. There were no advertisements, no posters, just the song itself, and within 3 weeks, it was playing on 83 radio stations. By September, it had reached #1 in 6 countries. In just 18 months, it sold 9 million copies in Britain alone. Diana stayed at #1 for 9 weeks, selling 1.25 million copies and breaking every record except for Rock Around the Clock. In Canada, 2 vinyl plants in Edmonton ran 24 hours a day just to keep up with the demand. But even before the song's success exploded, Paul had booked a local concert in Ottawa on October 28, 1956 at the Capitol Theatre. That night turned into a disaster. The crowd believed he was lip-syncing. They booed, hurled coins at him, and forced him to run off stage. Humiliated, Paul told the promoter, "I'm never singing in this town again." He kept that vow for 25 years, only returning when Ottawa awarded him the key to the city in 1981. He later admitted that night had crushed his childhood. By 1959, Paul Anka was traveling non-stop, his passport showing 146,000 kilometers flown that year alone. In January, he was in London. By March, Sydney. By June, Tokyo. And then Havana, just before Castro's revolution toppled the government. He was still only 17 and legally needed a guardian to co-sign his performances, but he was all ready. earning $15,000 a night, sometimes even out-turning Sinatra himself. Fans were so overwhelmed that they would throw shoes onto the stage just to make him bend down and touch the ground of their country. In Cuba, police had to ban women from wearing high heels at his concerts to prevent chaos. Yet, Paul wasn't just performing, he was studying the music business. In 1958, he discovered that European record deals paid far better than those in the US. So he renegotiated his contracts. In America, he earned 1.5 cents per record sold, but overseas he secured 3 cents. More importantly, he insisted on keeping his publishing rights. At only 17, he founded his own company, Spanka Music.